Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna.gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm really super excited to have my guest, Megan, here today. Megan, thank you so much for spending the time with me. I appreciate you being here. I can't wait to hear your story and hear what you're all about and letting everyone hear who you are. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you've had some pretty amazing guests so far. So I was excited when you asked.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I couldn't wait to have you on here because I've seen you on social media and I see what you're all about from afar. And I'm a big fan of yours. So I appreciate you being here. So,
well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So share with us where you're coming from. Where in the country are you coming from?
So I am currently in South Central Pennsylvania right now. So that has been home base for me forever. This is where I grew up. However, the past, almost 9 years, I was a travel nurse. So I was very nomadic all around the United States. And so, my now husband, went with me. But we lived all over the place. And then kind of in between assignments, we would come back to Pennsylvania. So when I left bedside, which we can get into a little bit later, I moved back to South Central PA for a while. However, we are actually moving to Southern Tennessee here in the next month, I think. Yeah. So
wow.
We're all over the
nomad.
place.
You are a nomad. So Pennsylvania's always been your home base. You grew up there?
Yes, correct.
Did you go to school there?
Yes. Yeah. So it's specifically Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my nursing degree.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Did you go, I always ask this question because there really are two camps, whether you went to nursing school right away or you took a different route and then ended up in nursing school. What was your route?
So I went immediately. My mother is a nurse. She's a pediatric nurse. I think she's coming up on almost 40 years at the bedside, which God bless her.
Wow.
She's awesome.
She's still practicing?
I think she's about to retire though within the next few months, but yes, she is. Yeah. So I grew up around it. She always loved her job. And so I did I think it was shadowing in high school. I shadowed a nurse, I think a pharmacist, a physical therapist, and I just fell in love with nursing. So I pretty much knew immediately that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And went to school right away. Did you know what specialty you wanted to be in right away, or did you kind of feel it out? What was that like for you?
I didn't. How I got my first job was one of my really good friends in nursing school was an nurse's aide on a floor, I think for the last year that we were in school. And so she kind of had an in at a job at UPMC there in Pittsburgh. And so she put in a good word with her manager and I got an interview, but it was a trauma ortho, spinal surgery, had a little bit of urology, med surge. So I kind of fell into that, which was totally fine. I actually really liked it. And then like I said, my now boyfriend at the time, he actually convinced me to start traveling. And so that specific specialty was a little bit too specialized to do travel nursing.
Gotcha.
So I ended up pretty much just going into med surge from that point on. And so that has always been probably where I have my most years of experience is med surg and telemetry. So when you decided to go down the traveling route, how long had you been bedside? Almost 2 years.
Okay. That's pretty early then to jump into that. And what was
Yeah.
the reasoning? Just to explore, or you wanted to change? Tell me more about that, because I don't think we've really talked to two men. I don't know if I've talked to anyone that's really done traveling. What
hmm
Tell me a little bit more about that decision to travel.
I think it was more so just to explore. I mean, I've basically been born and raised in PA. Technically, I was born in Kansas, but I grew up here. And really, this is all I knew. And so, my husband had his family moved around a lot, and so he kind of
Oh,
came from that, and he's the one that
yeah.
convinced me. So I have to tell him, I have to give him kudos because
Yeah.
I told him if we would have never met, I probably would still be in Pittsburgh because I was the type of person that just did not like change. So I
Yeah.
probably would still have the same job. I'd still probably be there, but that would have never led to legal nursing whatsoever. I would have never had the courage to do it. So
Right, right,
it all
right.
started, I think, at that moment when I was like, all right, I guess we're doing it.
Yeah.
So
So 2 years bedside, you decide to travel. Where was your first assignment?
my first assignment was in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And that was actually, that turned out to be kind of a mess because I was let go from that job, I think after 2 months, because they were building a brand new addition onto their facility and realized that they needed to make budget cuts. And so they cut every single
The
travel
travelers.
nurse. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, is what's going to happen to me now? Like
Yeah.
every assignment I'm going to be, because you have to sign a lease when you go to
Right.
these places. And so I was locked in a lease, and
Oh.
luckily I actually found another job. I think it was only a mile away from the other hospital. So I got really lucky.
Mm-hmm. And then, so how long were you in Denver then? A long time,
That
or?
no, I think I want to say that was only 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Was it in the winter or in the in the summer?
It was, I think it was, yes, it went into the winter,
Yeah.
which I didn't mind
Well,
because
yeah, because
yeah,
you probably
Colorado is, it's dry. And so,
Mhm.
the weather, it's not as bad as it is here in Pennsylvania. It's not as
Yeah. Yeah.
bone chillingly cold,
I was
I'd
gonna
say.
say you're used to weather. I'm sure it wasn't that big of a difference. For me, it would be it would be
Yeah.
different, Southern California girl. Um, okay, so how long then did you travel a bunch? I mean, how many years was it that you traveled? Because you
Yeah.
said you traveled, and then the LNC world came into play. But so how long did you travel, and kind of where did you end up? I'm always curious about
Sure.
traveling and where.
Yeah, and I won't take up too much time because it was actually a ton of places. But so
Yeah.
it was for a total of about 8 years.
Okay.
And so from there, from Denver, I went to Texas, Austin, Texas. From there, Southern California. So I did the LA, the
Mhm.
San Diego.
Mhm.
I went back to Pennsylvania for a little bit, went to Florida, which, funny side note, my husband and I actually lived in an RV in Florida for, I think, a year and a half during COVID. So
Uh-huh.
that's kind of when COVID hit was,
Right.
when I went down to Florida for those assignments. I think back to Texas for a while. So we were all over for about 8 years. The longest I ever stayed somewhere was for a year.
Mm.
And then because after that year, you're considered a permanent resident of that area at
Oh,
that point.
right.
And so you either have to move on or stay and find something permanent.
Mm.
And so I actually did stay in San Diego for another year and got a permanent position because we liked it so much.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
I get
But
that. That's where I grew up.
oh,
So yeah. No,
yep.
it's wonderful down there.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
so you're kind of all over the place. You really have covered both coasts, obviously.
Yep.
And was it always same specialty, med surge, telemetry?
It was. I will say I did get a gig on it was a liver and kidney transplant unit
Oh,
that
okay.
also took some med surge patients. But after I was there for a few weeks, they let me take some of the transplant patients, and I actually learned a lot that assignment. I really liked it.
Yeah.
That was out of
Yeah.
San Antonio, so
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was great. But otherwise, yes, it was mainly med surge, telemetry, and then I actually did find one or two assignments that were ortho and spine
Mm-hmm.
ortho
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and neurosurgery. So I
Right.
did get that
Right.
in there as
Right.
well. But
You covered all that.
Mhm.
Okay, so going back to how you said that you really didn't like change, and obviously your boyfriend at the time said, "Let's do this." So clearly, travel is that's all you're doing is constant change, right? I mean, granted, the year you're here, there, a couple months here, but you're constantly changing and you're constantly getting used to new places. Did you? I mean, obviously you embrace change. Did you completely change your ways and go, now you kind of sought change? Is that what it was like for you? I mean, I
Yeah.
can
Yeah,
imagine.
you're spot on. You're spot
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Travel nursing forces you to. I mean, you basically get 12 hours of orientation on the unit if you're lucky. Sometimes they pull you early and you have to because they just need a body. They need
Right.
someone
Yeah.
taking
That's
care
why
of the
you're there.
patients.
Yeah. That's why you're
Yep.
there.
So, you're kind of thrown to the wolves and you got to figure it out.
Mhm.
It's your license, it's your job. So, you learn to ask a ton of questions because you want to make sure you're doing things according to their policies and procedures and how they do things. And so that it's constant change. You might be floated mid shift to go somewhere,
Right.
so
Mhm.
you just have to be on your toes all the time. And so that definitely gave me a nice buffer to transition into the LNC world. I was still
Right.
terrified to do it, but
Yeah.
it gave
Yeah. Yeah.
gave me the courage.
Sure, sure.
So
Those that learn to change are much easier. It's just much easier to take the big leap and gulp and figure out the other side. So I imagine during all of these changes that you had great assignments and then you had not so great assignments. Were you like right? I mean, for 8 years you had to have had great places and then places that were like, "Get me out of here." Because
mhm.
that's just the nature of traveling, what I've heard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the beginning before COVID, a lot of the times you would be at least interviewed by the manager or the director of the floor, and at least you could ask some questions like, maybe what's the patient ratio going to be and things like that.
Mhm.
Whereas I feel like when COVID hit and afterwards, they kind of stopped doing that. They were just like, what, if you meet the qualifications, your resume looks good, you have the experience, then we'll take you. And so it was kind of a risk. You might ask if you could get the manager's contact information or something,
Right.
but you were lucky to actually speak to somebody. And so sometimes you didn't know what you were walking into.
Mm.
um, like I remember one assignment down in Florida was a little bit like that. I showed up, it was during COVID, and you
Yeah.
know there were some days where they were trying to give me a ninth patient, and I was just like,
Gee.
what in the world? And it was a
Yeah.
it was a med surg
Yeah.
floor. It was a pretty high acuity. I believe towards the end we actually became an all COVID floor, and I had 8 patients at the same time. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that was definitely one I was ready to move on from, but it happens, you
Yeah,
know.
and I mean, just like everyone, I think COVID really took its toll on not only just healthcare in general and how we handle it, but also our own how we show up and how, the experiences that we had. We all have stories, no matter
Mhm.
what specialty we were in, we have COVID stories and those will stick with us forever. And I also think that things after COVID have changed because of COVID and not necessarily in a good way. We lost a lot of nurses for that reason, because of those nurse ratios or COVID in general. People were like, peace out. I'm out of here. I mean, we watched it. And then now this influx of, new nurses, you don't necessarily, and again, my experience only and what I've heard from others is that you don't necessarily get that training or one-on-one, or it's really sad that they even now that people are kind of thrown to the wolves without um the training that you and I had, before COVID,
Mhm.
pre-COVID
Sure.
training and post-COVID training, because we lost so
Mhm.
many. So it's like, sorry, we need you. Here you go. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I've witnessed that, unfortunately.
Well,
Um,
I think it started in clinicals in the schooling because of COVID. They couldn't go to the hospital and get that
it's
hands-on
true.
clinical experience, and so that really, unfortunately, I think not set them up for failure, but put them a little bit
Yeah.
behind. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
It's a
then
very good way.
they're coming out of school, and unfortunately, a lot of the more experienced nurses have left, and so they're
Mhm.
being trained by nurses that may only have a year or two of experience, and so you can see where it's coming
Yeah.
up short a little bit, unfortunately, and it's
Yeah.
nobody's fault. It's just it is what
No,
it is.
no, it
You
is what
know?
it is. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Hopefully then, in the future we'll have those that have stuck around, and then they do become, the seasoned nurses that can teach, and we'll kind of get some great nursing foundation again. But yeah, I think COVID really just through healthcare just a big old curveball.
Sure did.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the LNC world. You decided to go into legal nurse consulting. How did you know about it? Had you heard about it? Did someone, was someone already doing it? What was that like for you?
So I actually was deposed a couple years ago on a case
Mhm.
that involved a patient that I had taken care of. It was an unfortunate thing because it was a misdiagnosis. None of the nurses were named in the case. Nursing care wasn't in question. I was more like a fact witness as to kind of
Sure.
the events that had happened.
Mhm.
And so I remember the attorney of the hospital reaching out to me, and he said that he had had a legal nurse look over my charting and made like a nice little chronology so I could see, my care during the shift. And I was like, oh, like what is that? What is a legal nurse? And he was like, oh yeah, I have nurses that work for me. And so I was super intrigued. At that time, a couple years ago, travel pay was still so good. I that kind of was just
Right.
put on the back burner at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, However, when I decided to think about leaving the bedside, that kind of came back up. And so I did a lot of research and was like, this is something I could totally see myself doing. And so I was on my last travel assignment. I think it was at the end of 2022.
Mhm.
And I was just sitting there and I was like, I feel like I cannot take care of the patients the way that I want to. So something's got to change. And so I said, after this last assignment, I'm done. And I'm just going to put 150% into trying to start my own LNC business. And I gave myself a couple
Wow.
months.
Yeah.
And, I said, if I can't at least pay my bills after 6 months, then I'll
Yeah.
have to go back. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's
So
how I
you
found out about it, which,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So you did take a big leap what was your training like? Did you go through, I mean, you don't need to name the program or anything. Did you go through a program? Did you have a mentorship? Did you reach out to people? Did you wing it? What was that like for you?
So I did a bunch of research. I started out reading, I think I read a few of Pat Iyer's books. I got the big AALNC textbook,
Mhm.
got that. Long story short, I did a lot of my own self learning, self
Okay.
research.
Mhm.
I decided that report writing would probably be where I would need the most help.
Mhm.
So I took a report writing class
Mhm.
that I loved. That was, I mean, I can name her Pat Iyer. She's great. Her course was great.
Yeah.
And then I decided to take the route of subcontracting.
Okay.
So I jumped on the good old LinkedIn and decided to see if I could find some nurses that were willing to, let me subcontract for them. And that's how I've learned a
Yeah.
lot, I will
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
If that's okay, I love the fact that you share that. If it's okay, if you could share, um, kind of how you decided. Obviously, you decided that you wanted to subcontract. How did you reach out to nurses? Because we get this a lot now, is that people want to start, people are doing the research, or people have gone through programs and they want to start subcontracting. What did that look like for you? And what kind of advice would you give those that are ready to subcontract? Like what to do and what not to do? Really?
Sure. Yeah. And I don't know if it's what to do and what not to do, but I'll just say what worked for me. And so I kind of got it in my head that it probably will not be received well just messaging a bunch of nurses asking for work.
Right.
They don't know me. They don't, and I'll go back to this multiple times, but I've heard this so many times. It's the know, like, and trust piece.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
People probably are not going to give you work unless they know, like, and trust you. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, how can I do that without directly asking for work? And so I really used LinkedIn as my platform. And so I had never used it before. I got on and I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to get rid of this fear about posting and putting myself out there, and you just have to do it. And so I committed to posting at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly leaned into the fact that I was new. I kind of advertised that I was a newer LNC. Mm-hmm. Consistently posting valuable educational content, interacting with other nurses on their posts, engaging on their posts. And I actually had all of my nurses reach out to me. So I never once direct messaged somebody asking for work. So, and I honestly think that has been the difference of the value of the nurse too, because the nurses that I sub for are amazing. I owe them everything. Honestly, they've taught me so much. So but LinkedIn was really a game changer for me, I think.
Yeah. I love that you've shared the know, like, and trust, because that's what it all comes out in any business, and any business, it's know, like, and trust. And the fact that you knew that you needed to be visible, right? And what you shared needed to be valuable. So I love the fact that they reached out to you, which obviously shows that your visibility is attracting others. I mean, that's how your content is amazing. And it's very recognizable in that it stands out from the crowd, and it's inviting, which carries into that know, like, and trust factor. So it's no surprise that you attracted really quality nurses, because they're looking for the right people to help them, because it is their connection with their attorney clients that matters, and they want to make sure that they choose the right person. And the only way to know that is to really watch and see if they connect with you. So I really commend you for understanding that early and just taking that leap, right? That's probably you're like, I have nothing to lose by doing this. I'm guessing that's what you basically said. I have nothing to lose. And so when it came to deciding what to share on social media, posting valuable things, what did you find for yourself, was valuable? Did you share things, and then based on what you shared, you're like, okay, people seem to like that, I think I'll post more of that? Or did you kind of already have a game plan?
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's a good question, because I think in the beginning, it's challenging to come up with content. I mean, I remember sitting there sometimes for like 2 hours, and I'm just like, I have no idea what to post about. So, and it's important to mention that I think you have to find your own voice. You can look to other people for examples and stuff, but it's important to find your own voice, because you don't want to sound like everybody else. You want to stand out. And so, like I said, I kind of leaned into the fact that I was new. And so in the beginning, I was kind of, like, hey, I'm a new LNC. I've taken this course, I've done these things, I'm ready for the next step. I would post maybe some nursing, just educational nursing things, disease processes, that kind of stuff. What I really do now is, once I've kind of gotten more experience, is I just try to think about what's happening with me that week. Like, what am I doing? What kind of work product am I working on for my attorney? What does that work product include, and how is that helping that attorney? maybe it's an interesting disease processes that I've come across in a case and I had to do a little bit of research myself. I'll post about that.
Mm-hmm.
Client reviews. I mean, they don't have to come from attorneys. They can come from your nurses that you sub with,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else. They say you should post, I don't remember what the percentage is, but make sure you also post some personal stuff in there because people want to get to know you a little bit as well. But I feel like doing that has resonated with people. And so I tend to get comments and get engagements. And so it must be working. I mean, I'm not going to call myself a LinkedIn expert, but that's just what's working for me. And
yeah, it's working for you. Yeah. I love that. And the fact that, you have really kind of thought about what you're doing that week. I just had a conversation with someone about that, about being you and like being your own voice. And it was really, you can follow what everyone says you should do. And if it feels forced, it will show. But if you're doing it because it's you and you enjoy it, it's going to come through. And so it's just permission to be you. And I was having this conversation. We were talking about LinkedIn content, and I was having a conversation kind of about this podcast. And it was like, you know what? This is something that I have done in the past. I love doing it. There were a couple podcasts already out there in the LNC world. I didn't know anybody in the LNC community really well, but I knew that this would be enjoyable for me, and my goal was for it to be enjoyable for whoever else was on here, and that was it. And I just took the leap of faith because it was me, and it wasn't what everybody else said I should do. It was just something that I knew that I could share on social media and that I could have a conversation. I love to talk, ask my friends. I laugh because it is now a running joke on how much I love it. Oh no, it's no surprise that you have a podcast. But it was me and following what I resonate with because it shows. So if you're forcing yourself to post X, Y, and Z because so-and-so is posting X, Y, and Z, it's going to show. So I love that you just gave everyone permission to be themselves as well. So yes. I think we struggle. We in general, everyone in any business struggle with what is valuable, right? So by you sitting there saying, I sat there for 2 hours, not knowing what to post, you're essentially saying, what is going to be valuable? I don't know what's going to be valuable. Sometimes you don't know, but what it comes down to is if it resonated with you, it means that it came from you and that you share it. And I don't know if you come from the same cloth, but if you share it and nobody likes it, oh, well, it came from me and I can't change that. Versus if you share something that you feel like should work and doesn't work, well, of course it's not going to work because you're trying to follow some formula that's not you. So, and it comes across with your content just from me witnessing it. It's very genuine. It's very you. And like you said, everybody is different, I love that. I love that. So it's kind of, you just gave the magic, wand to everybody. How do you succeed on LinkedIn? Well, you be yourself and you just, someone told me recently too about being valuable. It was like, everything you share is valuable. It doesn't need to be a certain thing. It's just, it's valuable. You're having a conversation with, the 5 other people that are going to comment on hopefully. It's valuable because you're sharing it. It doesn't need to be a certain thing. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah. Like I'll share one example. I think this was before I even got my first case because I was struggling with content and I was like, how am I going to show my value to nurses that are looking for subcontractors without posting directly, hire me, hire me, hire me?
Right.
And so I was like, what nursing attributes do I have that will transition well over into LNC work and kind of give, I think I posted something like, these are the attributes, one, detail oriented, and this is how,
Mm-hmm.
I would be an asset to your team. Two, I don't know, just reliable,
Right.
dependable, just things like that.
Yeah.
Flexible, I don't know, responsive to emails,
Right.
just things like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I got the attention. And then I will say too about sub work is word spreads. So if you get in with one nurse and they have other LNC friends that are probably looking for subs and
Absolutely.
they really like your work, like I said, word will spread. And so you can get in
Absolutely.
with multiple people. And so um that's pretty much what happened to me, I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. 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 No, that you're right. You're right. Word does spread very quickly. Um, Now, on a different note, but something that you just talked about was if your work is good, people are going to talk about it. So a lot of questions that I get all the time is, how do I know if my work is good, right? How do you know if your work is good if you're brand new and you haven't been doing it that long and maybe you've done a few practice cases and you've gotten some feedback? What would your advice be on, creating a great product? Obviously, subcontracting, but I think a little bit
Yeah.
more than that. What would you say?
I was really lucky with the first nurse that hired me, I guess is the right word, but she knew I was brand new. She knew I had only taken a writing course. I think the difference between what you're talking about is when you're doing a work product for a nurse as a subcontractor, ask questions if you don't know, get clarification, maybe submit your report halfway through to make sure you're doing things correctly, things like that, so that the end product is going to blow them away.
Right.
And 3 or 4 weeks later, you're not turning in something that's way out of
Right.
their expectations.
Right.
Because they are, at the end of the day, it's their business. It's
Mm-hmm.
the work product that you are doing for them. They are turning into their attorney client with their name on it. And so they want it to be perfect. So they are more than willing to help you along the way in the beginning, or even now I ask for help. But
Yeah.
I think that was a really good way of kind of honing in my skills, different work
Right.
products. And then,
Yeah.
at the end, I was turning in exactly what they wanted.
Right. Right. So you listened.
So
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Listening.
Being a good listener, being a good listener pays off. Just don't
Yes.
just assume or don't just assume that that's what they want, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
hurt to ask. And I love the fact that you just
Mhm.
said that, even that you still ask, because it only helps, um without using the word perfect, but it only helps perfect your product is really honing in and asking questions, because sometimes they probably don't realize what they want until you ask them, and then they go, oh, well, I appreciate you asking, and then you can give them a more specific product. So that,
Sure.
yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, and they're not going to expect you to know everything if they
Right.
know you're
That's,
new.
yeah.
And
That's,
so, the only way you're going to learn is if you ask questions.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think that
Yeah.
we as nurses expect to be, ahead of the game, and when you realize that they know that you're new, then they're going to give that into consideration. So I love that you just gave everybody permission as well to be it's okay to be new. It's
Yes,
okay.
it
You don't have to
is.
know it all. You don't have to know it all.
No.
All right. Well, what kind of advice would you give a new legal nurse that's ready? And again, you jumped and went bedside, and left bedside and went into legal nursing. Would you give that advice to somebody else, or what would that advice be if someone was wanting to leave bedside and was interested in legal nursing? Because there are a lot of people that are doing both, but in your case, you took that leap.
Sure. So I would probably say it would really depend on their whole situation. Like I don't think I would ever tell someone to just do it, if they're,
Yeah.
because it's honestly the scary part is leaving that consistent paycheck.
Hmm.
However, the good thing about nursing is that there's always going to be a job for you.
Right.
So, if you do decide to take that leap and totally leave for a few months and try to get it off the ground, and you're not exactly where you want to be in 6 months, you can go back PRN or part time or full, whatever you need to do.
Mhm.
I would say if you do decide to take the leap and totally leave bedside, you need to be doing something every day, even if it's small, just to little
Yeah.
baby steps to grow
Yeah.
your business will totally add up in six
Yeah.
months to a year.
Yeah.
It's crazy because at the beginning you're like, there are so many things I don't even know, and then 6 months in, you're like, wow, I can't believe I accomplished all that,
Yeah.
in that short
Yeah.
amount of time. And so, make sure you're doing something. Not maybe not every day. Obviously, take weekends off if you'd like to, but
No, but I
at
think that
least,
that's a good point. And I
yeah.
actually, I'm glad that you said that because there's a book that I don't know if you've read it, but it's called The Compound Effect, and it really has to do with
Mm,
that. It's really taking a little step each day, and at the end, what you've accomplished is the world. And it's called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. He's one of my absolute favorite um, personal development business. He used to be the editor of Success Magazine. He's an amazing person. I've met him a couple times. He was like
mm.
my personal development business crush. But there's a story. It's funny. Um, there's a story that there are a few stories that he tells in this book that I totally resonate and still to this day remember. But one of those things is looking at a staircase. And I use this analogy for anybody that's talking about, wanting to get something accomplished, something big accomplished, but you look at this staircase ahead of you and you're like, how the heck am I going to get up to the top of this staircase? And it's really that one step at a time. You look at the first step and then you take that first step and then you don't look at the rest of the steps until you finish that first step. And then you take the next step. And if you're doing that every day over a period of time, by the end, you'll have looked down and you have climbed that incredibly huge staircase. So it's like, that's just one little analogy that I use a lot. But I love that. And in the beginning, yes, we want to balance our life and our weekends and all that. But if you're going to take the leap and build something big, then sometimes those sacrifices, there's still times where you can just shut down when your eyeballs are bugging out and you shut down and you spend time with your family. But in the beginning, those are the sacrifices you make. It's you don't drop
Sure.
everything, but um,
No.
and you're
And
proof that it's paid off.
yeah, and it can be something as simple as listening to a podcast for an hour. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
something huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
We used to say in a previous business was 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day of something.
mhm.
It was like reading 10 minutes a day, or this is really before podcast. Or listening 10 minutes a day. But
Mhm.
anybody can do
Sure.
something for 10 minutes, right? And it is that compound effect, and it builds up and it keeps you motivated, it keeps you inspired, even if it's, messaging another legal nurse and or complimenting them on their content, or pouring into someone. 10 minutes a day goes a long way. Oh, that rhymed. That was
Mhm.
really good.
It's your new slogan.
My new slogan. 10 minutes a day goes a long way. Oh gosh. Okay. So do you have any other last advice? I appreciate you sharing all this. This has been such a
Yeah.
great conversation. I love hearing your story. I love that you are an advocate of change in a good way, because I know so many nurses that are just afraid of change. So I love the fact that you've embraced it. You were one
Mhm.
that feared it, and you embraced it, and it's only benefited you in the long run. So, anything last that you'd like to share to any legal nurses out there that are struggling or
Yeah. I would say it's hard not to do, but try not to compare yourself to other legal nurses because really with this, with legal nursing as an independent legal nurse, you can define your own success, really. You can subcontract only if that's what you want to do. You can have 1 or 2 nurses, or you can be that nurse that has the 50 attorney clients, that has 10 subcontractors underneath her or him, and grow your business into that. Maybe your goal is to just step away from bedside 1 shift a week, and that's your definition of success. So just don't put a lot of weight on your shoulders when you see, things on LinkedIn too, because it goes with all social media, is people tend to only share successes, whereas we all know with this business, there's a lot of struggles too. So
Absolutely.
you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of unanswered emails and calls, and maybe opportunities won't work out. But it's if you give up too soon. I don't. I just had this conversation with one of the nurses I sub with, because I was having a rough week about 2 weeks ago, and she was like, you know what, Megan? She's like, this is when people give up, is when they get a few no's. They think they're on the brink of something, and then they get the few no's that kind of knocks them back. And she said, people just give up too soon. And so just keep going, because we're in this, at least I got into this too. Not only did I want to step away from bedside, but I wanted to, and this may sound a little corny, but just find my passion for nursing again, because it had gone out the window pretty much. And I don't like saying that, but it truthfully, being transparent, it did. Yeah. I was not happy with where I was. And, this has definitely brought that spark back for nursing. And you can tell when people love what they do. And now I understand, honestly.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that you share that, because I can relate to that very much so. And I'm sure that there are so many out there that can, because they got into nursing for a reason, but maybe now, they do look back at it and go, well, is this really my reason? And to find that is really, really enjoyable. So I'm really glad that you shared that. So I appreciate you sharing everything. And now, can you let everyone know where they can find you? And obviously this will be in the show notes as well, but let everyone know where they can find you.
Sure. So I believe I'm just Megan Allen, BSNRN legal nurse on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Just message on LinkedIn. And my email address is megan@thelegalnurseshop.com, SHOP.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate this. I look forward to, staying connected over there on LinkedIn and cheering you on and, all of your success. So congratulations.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at anna.gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.